Brendan is an expert in launching new SaaS, software as a service, products. He has led the creation of numerous banking applications and led multiple product teams. He is an expert in customer interviews as well as the full entrepreneurial process. So he's a wealth of information. And it's worth noting that he's a former Startup Weekend Makers Edition winner, where in one weekend he led a team, which I was on, of entrepreneurs and the creation of a functioning wireless leash for kids. Which, cool enough, is actually now, I don't know if you've talked to TrackEd, but there's actually the idea we worked on years and years ago is actually a startup in HQ Raleigh now. That's
funny.
Multiple iterations.
All right. How's my audio? Am I coming through? Good. Okay. All right. I got to share my screen. I normally wouldn't do a PowerPoint, but with the whole remote thing, I thought it would be better than looking at my face. So, let's see if I can figure out how to share the screen and show the presentation together.
Let me see. Okay, good. I'm glad you can share it.
All right. Screen shared, and
I'm digging the purple, Brendan.
Yeah, I went through all the default ones and chose the prettiest.
Legit.
And Christina, if you guys were on earlier, I quit my job last week and now don't have access to PowerPoint. So we're running with Google Slides. And hopefully these are big enough to see, because that's what I got. Okay. Cool. So we're going to talk about how to do customer interviews that don't suck, and basically how to get the truth from your customers. And that the word truth in there is probably the most important part, because it's really easy to talk to customers and have them tell you things that isn't actually how they're going to behave when they actually are considering whether or not to purchase from you. So we're going to start, and this is going to be interactive and discussion based, and I, like Christina, can sit in silence indefinitely. So who wants to answer the first question, or multiple people can give answers here of why should we interview customers? Why should we talk to customers? What are some reasons for that?
Because you don't want to become another one of the statistics of businesses that failed.
Yeah, right. So to put that another way, we want to de-risk our business, right? We want to make sure that we're more confident that we're going to be able to succeed with what we're investing our time and money into. Cool. What's another reason you might want to talk to customers?
To find our customer segments.
Yep, establish customer segments. So who's going to be in your target market?
Know how to communicate with them in an effective way, or to know kind of what tone or what things resonate.
Yeah, so learning kind of what your customers are expecting in terms of messaging and how they talk about the problem that you're trying to solve too. Because sometimes if you're not in that industry you're selling to, then you might not know the exact language that they would use, or how they might Google for something, for instance. All right, and then in the chat we got, let's see if I can make this bigger. Let's see. Do they like my product? Do they hate my product? Yep, so we want to get, are we on the right track in terms of solving their problem? To make sure we actually want to work with them too. That's a really good point from Kristen. It's really hard to start a business and sustain a business in a market where you don't like those customers. I've worked in banking for the last 6 years, and I actually really like working with bankers. They're super nice people. But I probably wouldn't have lasted 6 years if that wasn't the case. Nora said make more customers. Yep, so we want to expand our market and sell to more people. Learn what they want. and know their pain points. Cool. So yeah, so that covers most of it. And you know, basically the way I think about this when I'm thinking about talking to customers is, and this is what I suggest everyone do, is to choose 2 or 3 big questions that you want the answer to when you're talking to customers. So it's tempting to say, oh, I have a potential customer on the phone or someone I want to learn from. I want to know everything that they can possibly tell me. And I want to know, you know, what magazines they read. And I want to know how old their kids are. And I want to know how many customers they have if they're a business. It gets too much and it's hard to focus, and you end up kind of learning nothing by trying to learn everything. So what we do is we come up with like 2 or 3 big questions to answer. So these are the places where you're struggling in your business and you want to kind of learn from your customers about how to improve. So there's 2 categories that these questions will fall into. One is what I call de-risking the business, which is basically if you're a startup and you're relatively new, there's going to be a lot of unknowns. There's going to be unknowns about, will customers buy what I'm trying to sell? What price point will I be able to sell it at? What marketing channel should I use to reach them? What language is going to be useful in terms of like the #1 value proposition that I'm solving for them with my product? And I wouldn't try to hit all of those at the same time when I'm doing customer interviews. So choose 2 or 3 things. What channel should I use? What is the customer willing to pay? A really good one I like is, what do my customers hate about my competitors? Because that can give insight into how to differentiate or what to focus on in your marketing messaging. An important thing is, these are the questions that you're trying to answer, but you're not going to actually ask these to the customer because they're not going to typically give you an actual useful answer. So we're going to get into how to answer these questions and get real answers by asking good, solid questions. The next kind of thing to talk about is, whose opinion do we value and who should we interview? So I'll open it up again to the group of what our strategy should be here.
Nice.
Right. Jill says people with money. Lots of money. Any other ideas about who should we interview? Maybe better put, who should we not interview?
I would imagine you would define your target, at least to some extent.
Yeah, exactly.
Like who you're going to interview before you do it, because if you know for sure someone is not going to buy it, then don't waste your time.
Right. So yeah, so that's the important thing is, like, it's tempting to talk to your friends about your business idea, or your mom, or your partner, or your uncle who runs a small business. You know, basically don't value any of those people's opinions. So that includes Christina and myself. Don't listen to us. When it comes to your product, listen to people who are actually in your target market who would actually buy your product. Because they're the only ones that matter, and they're the only ones who matter in terms of judging what you're doing. So that kind of leads us into, how do you find those people? So I'm going to talk about new businesses and established businesses. For new businesses, it's basically a grind. So this is when your spouse and uncle and Christina come in handy, which is using your network to find people who would actually potentially be customers. Cold calling and cold emailing can work really well, depending on kind of what market you're into, but basically this is the hustle. You got to just figure it out, part of entrepreneurship. We can, if we want, when we get to Q&A, we can definitely get into tactics in terms of, you know, ways to do that reach out and how you should write the email and that kind of stuff. But yeah, so basically grind it out and just find people. For established businesses, the kind of top 3 people to talk to are people who just bought, so understanding why they bought went into their purchasing decision, especially if you're at the point in your business where you're not involved in that sale. So that could be you have a salesperson, or it could be you're selling something online and you don't actually directly interact with that person. Reaching out to them and talking to them about their buying process and understanding, you know, who they are, and getting those people to answer your questions is useful. People who just didn't buy, so if you had a prospect and they decided not to purchase from you, following up and doing kind of an exit interview type conversation about why they didn't, or having a trusted friend do that for you, so in case you feel that they might not give you exact answers. Those people can be really useful to improving your business. And then anyone who didn't renew or stopped buying from you. So the kind of common thing there is it's either people who gave you money or are no longer giving you money are the most helpful. And then the ones that you should talk to but have a little bit of trepidation about are current customers, because you already sold them and they're happy, and therefore they're not necessarily going to be particularly useful in helping you get other customers who didn't buy or stopped renewing, because you already have them. And then just be careful to not only listen to the loud customers, like reach out to the quiet ones who don't contact you too. And also make sure you talk to both the happy and the unhappy customers if you're doing it there, so you kind of get a spectrum. And then when you're talking to customers, my suggestion is try to make the most of their time. You can do these customer conversations in 10 to 15 minutes. It doesn't need to be, you know, an hour scheduled meeting with a Zoom link. Like, that's not necessary. But take advantage of them if they're being nice and willing to go longer and you're actually getting good info out of them, like suck them for all they're worth. Yeah, but also, like, if they are clearly not in your target market, don't waste their time and don't waste your time. Have a preference towards being informal with this. So that goes back to the Zoom meeting. So, you know, if you're at a bar and you meet someone who could be a customer, don't try to schedule something later. Just like quick hit them with a few questions, try to get their information, but do it right there on the spot. Or if you're at a networking event or on a Zoom conversation. I know it's a little different during COVID, but or if you're cold calling and you're like, do you have 5 minutes right now? Just do it now. And then you're going to have a higher success rate of actually having the conversation. So that goes into the next one of having the conversation in the moment versus scheduling a meeting. All right. Now we're going to do a mock interview. And so we're going to have one FYSO participant be our interviewer, preferably someone with a business that's accessible and someone can be a fake customer for. So maybe not robotic construction, which is one I heard earlier, because that might be a little technical. So who wants to be our interviewer? This is real easy. You just need to ask a few questions as you would if you were talking to a customer. And first you have to tell us what your goals are going into the conversation.
Chloe, you're down?
Yeah, it's probably going to suck, but no.
No,
That's all right.
You'll learn. Good.
All
Yeah.
right. So, and then we need a fake customer for Chloe. Who wants to do that?
Bueller. Jill. Yes.
Bill's got it. Okay. All right. So Chloe, just since I'm new, could you give the 30 seconds, what's your business? And then kind of what are you trying to figure out by doing customer interviews? What do you want to de-risk in your business?
Magoozy is going to be selling medicinal products. To start with, it will be high CBD hemp flower. So smokable hemp flower only, no CBD extracts, and it's grown bioponically. So no mineral salts, totally organic in water with a sustainable approach.
Cool. And can I ask you just a couple follow-up questions? Are you doing a consumer product, or are you going to be more on the wholesale side of things?
Consumer.
Consumer. And do you have an idea if it's going to be, are you going to be selling to stores or online or both or something else?
Potentially online, but potentially also involved in farmers markets and local type things.
Okay. Do you have one that you're starting with?
Yeah, I guess the one that would make the most sense would be the Pittsburgh Farmers Market.
Farmers market. Okay. Great. Okay. And what are you concerned about in your business that you think customer interviews could help you figure out or de-risk?
We don't know whether or not people actually care where their CBD comes from. A lot of it is grown in China. We want to figure out if people are interested in buying something with no pesticides, if they care if it's organic, if they care the effect it has on them. That's another part of our business. So it's like, how involved do people want to be with the CBD smokable hemp that they buy?
Okay. Yeah, I think the very first way you said it is probably the best way to end. Like, do people care about where their CBD comes from? So that would be our big question.
Okay.
All right. And Jill, just a couple questions or prompts for you as the actor that you're going to be here.
Yeah.
You are going to be a CBD user, and so just assume that as a baseline so that you're in the target market.
Yep.
And then otherwise you can answer the questions however you want. All right?
Which questions that Chloe asked?
Chloe's going to ask you starting now. Take it away, Chloe.
Okay. All right. Hi, Jill.
Hi, Chloe.
I was wondering if being familiar with the CBD industry, where your current supplier, do you know where they grow or where it comes from?
I think my current supply comes from Colorado.
And are you at all concerned with environmental impact?
Sure.
To what extent do you make an effort to avoid making an environmental impact? Like, are you currently concerned with buying your CBD from a different state?
I guess, and this shows that I'm kind of not a CBD user. Is it legal in North Carolina?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm more concerned about the pesticides used to raise the product than where it's coming from.
Okay.
So organics, yes, over location.
Okay, so you're willing to make a purchase out of state in order to ensure that your product is organic.
Yes.
And Do you look for a certified organic label, or do you read more into the product, how it's made?
The latter.
Okay, so it's not necessarily about the label for you.
Mm-mm. I mean, I want to know that, that pesticides weren't used, I guess. I just keep saying that word. So I want to make sure that it's not a product that is going to hurt me because of chemicals used to grow it.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, so your current supplier, you keep track of whether or not they use pesticides. And when you're buying it, do you consume the oil or the flour?
The oil.
Okay. Do you have the idea that the oil is better because, like, what do you use it for? What is the purpose of using the oil?
I use it for body aches and stress, and I don't like to smoke things.
All right, time out. Thank you both very much. Excellent work. Claps. Claps and snaps. So, all right. So we're going to kind of go, and let me first ask Chloe, how did you think that went, and what answers do you think you got from "Do people care where their CB comes from?" question?
I mean, I definitely got answers about the aspect of it being safe. So Jill expressed concerns more about it being safe than where it's grown. But those could play off of each other, right? Because if someone cares about the environment, they might find it better. And I could have asked this, like, if someone were local, would you prefer them over someone in a different state if it was organic?
And the other thing that would have mattered to me that we didn't get to is if my Colorado product is $50 and a North Carolina product is $25. I would prefer that. So we didn't get to price point.
That's true. Yeah. That's a good point.
All right. So I wrote down some of the questions that Chloe asked, and I'm kind of go through and talk about which ones were really good, which ones we can change and make better, and which ones we should avoid. So, so the first one was an excellent question, which was, do you know where your CBD comes from? That question isn't, it's non-leading. It's just do you know this information or not? The customer wouldn't be able to guess, like, I want them to say yes or I want them to say no. That's important. You want kind of like equal balance and not like the customer to feel like they should answer one way or the other. And it also would instantly tell you if this conversation is useful to you or not, right? Because if they don't care, then, if they don't know, then they don't care, right? So you got to check in the, answering our big question of, do people care about where it comes from? They don't know where their current product comes from. They don't care. We can stop the conversation. Really easy. All right. So then from there, she said, yeah, I know where it comes from. It's from Colorado. I think Chloe did a good thing and kind of went towards figuring out why that's important or why she knows it. So she asked, are you concerned with the environmental impact with the CBD? That question is a little bit leading in that who's not going to say, unless they're an asshole, no, I don't care about the environmental impact of my product, right? Like that could be used as a nice transition in a conversation, but yeah, it's just it's not going to get us any new information. A kind of alternate question would be, you know, do you know where it comes from? Do you know about the brand? Can you tell me some about the brand? In which case, you might learn, one, do they know the brand, or is this something that's a relatively generic product for them and they'll just buy whatever? And if they know the brand and then they know something about it, what they can tell you about it will be what they actually care about. So, so if they can tell you it's made by these hippies on a commune who give their proceeds to help local school systems, like they care about a charity aspect of it. If they say, oh, it's organic and it's even beyond organic because they do these extra things, and you know, they plant trees to offset their carbon footprint, then you know they care about the environmental, or at least the organic aspect, and then you could dig into why is organic important to you. So kind of jumping from, you know, do you know where, to kind of an open-ended question of why do you know where is a nice place to go, so that you can learn about kind of what about the origin of the product they care about. So the point there is to kind of expand the conversation and learn why they know that fact, so that it can help inform you in your marketing. Because that's kind of, do people care about where it comes from? It's like, should we use this as a marketing message, is kind of where that question is leading.
Awesome.
So next question I wanted to talk about is, there were some yes or no questions after that, which maybe we want to, again, more open-ended rather than yes or no. The one that kind of tripped me up was the question about oil or flour product. And the reason that one tripped me up is it seemed off topic to me about the marketing message and where it comes from. So when we're doing these conversations, so that we don't go too broad, we want to make sure that we're always bringing the conversation back into our big question. And if knowing oil or flour is important to the conversation, you might start with just a quick hit of some demographics. So like, what's your current use? How many times a day or a week do you use? What form do you use it in? And why do you use it? Could be like some just bam, bam, bam right off the top. And now you can go into kind of your open-ended questions so that you know a little bit more about the person. And if you need to segment later, you can segment later because you know some demographic data. Cool. So that leads us into kind of how to ask these questions. And let me share back again. So let me stop for a second and say, any questions so far in the presentation? I kind of went for 20 minutes there without stopping. So.
I do have a question for you, Brendan. I'm wondering, obviously this is all around like an oral conversation. I'm wondering if we're going to get into like modalities of like, do all these rules apply if this is for an online survey type of thing also, or?
I'm trying to figure out how nicely to answer this question. I'll go with, I hate surveys for this. So surveys sometimes maybe have a place in the world. That place is not something that I will ever do.
But not in the beginning. Not in the beginning.
So the reason I say that is because generally you're not going to get rich enough information through a survey to actually make decisions on. The exceptions to that might be if you're trying to do things like judge total market size and you're a giant company. Like if Coca-Cola is opening a new product line, yeah, they probably want to survey people. But where we're starting businesses or have young businesses or small businesses, we're not going to get enough useful data, and it's not really going to be relevant to us because we're trying to get 1 customer, 5 customers, 10 customers, and learning how to sell at that scale, it just doesn't, like, finding enough people to survey that would be useful to you. It's like you should just talk to them if you found them. You're going to get more information that way. If you have an existing user base, so here's one way I've used surveys in my life. When I was working on the banking products, I could put a survey in the application and ask, 1,000 bankers in 2 days, do you do this in your job? Yes or no, and capture their email. And then I could go do customer interviews if they did that thing. So I didn't have to like filter that in the customer interviews. I could like skip that step. So I used surveys for that purpose, but otherwise I don't think they're useful. And that's my opinion. Other people might disagree, but I've said my piece on surveys. So, all right. Any other questions before we keep going here? Danny makes a good point to practice some good softball, or to toss in some good softball questions at the beginning to build rapport. So, yeah, so building rapport in an interview is important. Some of those like tell me about your business if you're B2B, or, how's COVID going? I don't know. That's kind of a downer question, but, building a little rapport at the beginning is helpful before you kind of hit them with the harder questions. So yeah, thanks for that, Danny. That's a great suggestion. All right, anyone just throw stuff in the chat or yell out if you want to ask something as we go. Cool, so here's kind of my summary of keeping the focus on the customer. So the first thing we want to do, and Chloe did a really good job of this, she didn't talk about her product. She didn't pitch in this at all. This is not a sales conversation. We're not talking about what we do. You can have really good customer conversations with never mentioning that you're a startup founder, or that you like are trying to build something, or what your solution potentially could be. Ask about their problems and the challenges that they're facing. So if you want to sell a product to breweries and you're talking to a brewery owner, the chances of him buying something that doesn't, like if you say, how's business going? What challenges are you facing right now? And what are the last 5 challenges that you solved? If he doesn't mention anything remotely in the realm of what you're interested in building, or she, in those like 5 or 6 things that they're thinking about, they're not going to be buying your product because they're not going to be looking for your product. So you're going to have to push out marketing and do outbound, and it's going to be a lot harder than if you find something that they're actively looking for a solution for. So that leads us into number 2, assess how important, pressing, or impactful the problem is. So, so ways to do this would be, so let's say you go in and you say, let's see, how are you doing your marketing right now, Mr. Small Business Owner? And Mr. Small Business Owner says, oh, I send direct mail postcards out to my area because I'm a lawn mowing company, and that's the best way to cover the whole geography that I serve. And I might say, oh, is finding the addresses with accurate names on them a difficult problem for you? And says, yeah, I have a vendor who does it, and sometimes people call me and say like, the name on this was wrong, but I'm still need lawn service, and say, oh, that's interesting. The name's wrong. Do you think you get a better response rate if you had all your customers' names right? Maybe I can help you with that. And he's like, no, I never really tried to solve that. It just kind of works. It's good enough right now. That's not an important, pressing, or impactful problem. Now, if he says, I send out direct mail and half of them come back returned to sender, and that cost me, and I can't reuse those, and I wasted half my money, that is a big, impactful problem that you could potentially sell to. If he's like, yeah, I really need a better vendor who has more accurate data because it's costing me $500 and I tried all of them and they're all terrible. Yeah, then you're in the general good place here. If you get generalities in answers, drill down. So if someone says like, how do you market your product? I do email marketing. That is really vague. So you might want to drill down. Do you do a newsletter? Do you do reminders? Like, so definitely if you get an answer that's vague or short, or you ask a yes or no question, which we know we should avoid, but sometimes you ask them anyway and they say yes, and then they don't say anything else. Say, oh, how do you do that? Or why do you do it that way? Or why did you say yes? Most importantly, no leading questions. So try to ask things that aren't politically charged, like, do you care about the environment? Most people are just going to say yes. Don't say, do you have a problem with this? Because they might have a problem with that, and they might say yes, but it's more important to figure out if that's actually an important problem. So try to search around that and say, how do you handle this? Things like that. Search for a no rather than a yes. This one is a little nuanced, I would say, but people generally are polite. And if you say, hey, I'm an entrepreneur starting a business, can I talk to you to get some information? They're going to want to be helpful and want to be agreeable. And that's generally how people are. And so you really want to find all the reasons someone's not going to buy from you, because when they actually are going to pull out their credit card, they're going to go through all the reasons that they're not going to buy from you before they give you that credit card. So try to dig in and find all the objections rather than getting a, yes, that's great, and moving on. Bad news is news. So if you call someone up and say, do you use CBD oil? Do you know where it's from? And they're like, no. Do you know the brand? No. Okay, goodbye. And you move on, and you learn something that customer doesn't care about that. And so maybe if you want to appeal to customers like that person, you're going to need a different marketing angle, basically. And then there's a lot of talk of idea validation in the startup space. That's a fine term, but don't seek validation of your idea. Like, don't go out and say, like, is this valid? Will this work? Will you buy this? Seek information about the problems people have and how they behave. So are they looking for a solution to the problem? You guys are getting the idea. And then finally, acknowledge when your idea isn't resonating, and note that down. And that's bad news, but it's news, and it's information. And just kind of be honest with yourself, and don't change into selling mode, because this person isn't going to be your customer, and they're never going to be your customer, even if you sell. So just keep that in mind. And then this is then kind of where I cheat on this is at the very end of the interview. If there's someone who I think could be a customer, I will go into a very quick selling mode of, great, thank you for all this information. Here's what I'm doing. Do you mind if I keep you in the loop? Because I think this could help you in the future. And then they might say yes, or they might say, if you're really on a good track, they might say, oh, can I be one of your first customers? And then that's really good. And then you might say, okay, $500, you can be my first customer or something. So yeah, definitely don't shy away. When you're done getting your questions answered and they seem good, then maybe sell. Cool. So we're going to play a round of the game, good question, bad question. And I need to pull the chat back up. All right, so this one you guys don't have to talk. Well, maybe you have to talk a little bit. But in the chat, I want people to write good or bad. I'm going to read a question off, and you're going to write whether it's a good question or a bad question. All right, first question. So the idea for my business is to sell emergency contact bracelets to mountain bikers. So they'll wear them, and if they get in a crash, their emergency contact will be on their wrist. Do you think it's a good idea? All right. Everyone's saying bad. Good. Who wants to say why it's a bad question?
You mentioned your idea right out the gate.
Yep, I mentioned my idea. That's bad. I asked them if they thought it was a good idea. If the person's nice, they're not going to want to say no because I'm super pumped about this and they don't want to disappoint me. So yeah, it's leading. They're going to be primed to say yes. It's not good. All right, next one. I'm not going to put this into context, but hopefully you guys get it. Question is, talk me through the last time you did that. All right, you guys learned quick. We got good. Someone said, All right, Cynthia, tell me what you're thinking.
I was just wondering if it could be better, but can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, talk me through the last time you did that.
I guess that's the way you drill down then, right?
Yeah, it's a drill down question for sure. So here it might be, let's say you're making, I'm going to keep using software examples because that's what I know. Let's say you're making new accounting software that's easier to use and faster, and accountants are going to save time and be able to have more customers, and it's going to be great, right? I might be asking them about the last time they reconciled expenses for a client. Walk me through the process of that so that I can learn how much of a pain it is. And then I can ask them, have you tried to make this go faster? What have you done? If they have, that's good news. If they haven't and they're just like, this is how it works, it's not great news. It would mean I would have to educate them about how mine is going to make theirs better and make them aware of the product because they're not looking for it right now. All right, next one. And if we want later, we can go more into pricing, but this question is, would you pay $100 for this? And it's a sibling question. How much would you pay for this? Are those good or bad questions? Once again, they are, would you pay $100 for this? And how much would you pay for this? I'll give you a hint. They are both either good or bad. They are in the same category. All right. So these are both bad questions. How much would you pay for this is a slightly less bad question. The reason that these are bad is because no one wants to seem cheap. You're not actually asking them to pay $100. You're asking them, in theory, would you pay $100? And alternatively, sometimes with the how much would you pay for this, you get really lowball answers because they want you to price it low if they're clever. So generally, if you're selling something to salespeople, you will get lowball prices. So better ways to ask that question. Obviously, there you have to describe what you're doing in the product, and that's okay. If what your big question is around payment, you're going to have to describe your product or what you're selling. It doesn't have to be a product, just whatever you're selling. Better questions are, what's a price where this would seem too cheap to be good? Another question would be, what's a price that would be outrageously expensive for this? Now you've established an upper and lower bound, and you can ask those questions to multiple people and kind of average out your upper bound, average out your lower bound, and your price is going to be somewhere in the middle. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do pricing is if you're selling to someone who purchases a lot of similar things to what you're selling, is you could ask for like, what did you purchase recently that you think would be comparable in value to this? And then you can look up the price for that, and now you're kind of in the ballpark. And then sometimes you're selling something like craft beer, CBD, where you're really going to be determined by the market. Now you can brand and up brand and charge more, but there's going to be a limit to that, and you're going to kind of know by what the other premium brands are charging. But for something where you don't know what to price it, I really like the what would be too cheap to be good and what would be outrageously expensive questions. Those are my favorites there. All right, next, good or bad. How are you dealing with this problem now? Yep, it's a good question. It's nice and open-ended. It's going to get you information about what they're doing to solve the problem at the moment. Are they spending money to solve it? Are they ignoring it? Do they care about it? Is it a bother? You're going to really be able to dig in well with that one. So now you've established that they have a problem, and you ask, if I built a product to solve that problem, would you buy it? Good or bad? All right, we're getting a bunch of bads, a good. And Molly, no one wants to tell you no to your face. Yes, that's exactly why. And Stacy said, you're not looking for validation. Yep, exactly. That's why this is a bad question. Is if you talk to someone for 5 minutes and about their problem, and then you're like, I'm going to solve it and you can buy it, they're generally going to say yes. But then if you didn't establish that it's actually like a needed thing that they actually feel pain for, they're not actually ever going to actually give you money for it. Cool. Let's see. Here's one around marketing channels. Do you read any trade magazines or blogs? And if so, which ones? All right, consensus seems to be good here. Yeah, that's a good question. It's not presumptuous, like you may read stuff, you may not. No one's going to judge you on that. You're not going to be biased one way or the other generally. And then if you just asked it a yes or no and didn't drill in, then it's a bad question, but you asked, if so, which ones. So generally you'd say the yes or no and then follow up with which ones, but you guys get the point. All right, and then I'm just gonna, for the sake of time, read through the last ones. So we have a good question of, have you ever tried to solve that problem? And if so, what did you do? And then, where should I advertise this so that you would see it? That's a bad question. And I've seen people ask things like that. It's like, customers not going to be able to answer that for you. And then another one that I like, tell me about the last time you bought something similar to this. So if you're selling something and you're uncertain how the sales process should go, if you're selling to a business, understanding the steps that they took to purchase something similar in the past can be really useful. So, if you're doing enterprise sales, that's, Vicky in procurement needs to sign this form, and then John in InfoSec needs to sign off, and we need to have a meet. Like, getting all those steps down and understanding it at the enterprise level is super important, but even at the business-to-business level or small business level or even a consumer level, understanding kind of their expectations of how they're going to buy can be really useful so that you can match what they're expecting or make it easier. All right, we're going to do another mock interview now. Christina, do we have time or do I need to wrap up?
Well, how about we just say if anyone needs to hop off, it's 9:29. We won't be mad. I will do, okay, so we will see you on Wednesday. And Wednesday's going to be all about the business model canvas, lean canvas. We're going to have a speaker, Mari. If you need to hop off now, great. And then Brendan, if you don't mind taking a little bit more time.
Yeah, I can hear my wife still cooking, so we're good. So, all right, so to advertise about what's left, we're going to do another mock interview, and then we're going to talk about how you know you have your answer to your big question, and then what to do next. So only a few things left. All right, who wants to be our business owner this time? And then we'll need a interviewee as well.
Anyone? Business owner?
Don't make us pick on someone. I feel like this was like the worst thing to say, like, you can leave and we're going to pick on someone, because everyone's like, I'm out.
Everyone's like, peace out.
Well, I feel like I honestly, I wanted to volunteer, but I'm so like overwhelmed by like, what do I want to know, right? So I'm a service-based business. And I mean, so how do I kind of like dig into like, who my potential customer is and what services are of value to them. Yeah.
Okay, can you give us a little context on what services you might be able to provide?
So I'm a retail strategist and creative advisor, and I just kind of rebranded myself as that. So, but I'm really targeting more small businesses because my passion is really helping to develop some of these abandoned downtown areas that we have way too many of, especially in North Carolina. But yeah. And my specialty is really in visual merchandising and brand experience and customer experience.
Okay, so I'm just going to make up a big question for you so you have one, which is, it sounds like your question is, what services, because you probably only want to like throw 2 or 3 out there to not confuse someone. What services should I lead with? That seems to me like the big question that you have some uncertainty around right now. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So let's see.
Now, but now, isn't that a leading question though?
But that's the question that you want answered. It's not what you're going to ask the person, right?
Yes. What services should I lead with? Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So that's our big question. Who's going to be our business owner here?
Yay.
I thought it was Rosalinda.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's who's gonna be the customer?
Yeah.
Kristen.
Oh, I can be the customer.
Stacey.
Okay.
Stacey.
All right. So, Stacey, your directions are or Rosalinda, what's your target market that she should be acting as here?
A small, like, boutique owner.
Okay. So, Stacey, you own a toy boutique that focuses on educational toys in a small town in wherever you live. Got it? All right. And this time I'm going to do timeouts as you go and coach along the way. So take it away, Rosalinda.
I feel like I'm going to start with a leading question right off the bat now. But Stacey, I'm curious. I know that a lot of small business owners have to bootstrap. So what are the services that you are sort of frustrated that you have to pay for, and what are the ones that are on your wish list that have to sit on the side?
I would say marketing is a lot of work that is very time consuming. Payroll for my staff, and I want to say one more. Operations, just operations in general. I want to focus on my business model. I don't want to have to worry about just the logistics of it, the operations of it.
All right. So I'm going to do timeout here after question one. Good first question, open-ended. A little perhaps too open-ended in that, you might not want to be comparing yourself to payroll provider and things like that, right? So a question you might want to start with that shouldn't be leading, I don't think. Have you ever hired a consultant to help you with your business?
Oh, okay.
Because there's going to be a lot of small businesses that probably have never done that. In which case you might ask, if they say no, you might ask a follow-up of, have you ever considered or gotten quotes for consulting before? I'm not exactly sure what the process works, but and then if they did, then you could ask, what was it for and why didn't you go with them? And if they never have, they're probably not going to be someone who's going to buy from you. And then if they have, all right, let's pretend you've asked Stacey this question. Stacey says, yes, I've hired consultants before. And that's all she says. All right, Rosalinda, what's your next question to Stacey?
So before you go there, just based on what she was gonna, based on the responses that she gave, I was gonna ask her about her marketing and which one of the marketing efforts felt the most successful and what she liked about it. I feel like that's marketing and customer retention, but maybe that's too
Yeah.
much for
All right, let's go down that route. Probably a nice open-ended way to do that would be how do you do marketing and what do you pay for in regarding marketing or something like that? What do you think about that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Stacey, so what type of marketing do you do, and like how successful or not successful has that been for you?
I mostly do social media marketing because I'm on a very tight budget. So I usually use my network to amplify what I'm trying to advertise.
Oh, nice. And do you have a big following on social media?
I do have a big following, and some people that I follow and friends have a big following as well. So it ripples. Mm-hmm. So it's mostly on social media.
And then I don't know what I would ask after that.
Okay, so are we in the realm of services you would provide, or not really here?
Not really, but I guess I was trying to gauge like how successful her like marketing efforts were, and to an extent, I almost feel like prices. One, I feel like marketing is a thing that probably most businesses should be spending money on. So I feel like if she's not spending money on, on marketing and relying more on the low hanging fruit, then like maybe she's not my customer. But I don't know if that's like the right assumption to make, and if there's like another question that I can ask that'll either help me move her in or out.
Yeah, so here's where you've hit a little bit of a dead end in the conversation, right? Where you're not moving towards things that are going to be helpful to you. You can try to steer it back with, have you ever hired a marketing consultant, or something more back towards, have you ever done this that's related to what you're doing, right? Or you can end the conversation there and be like, this person isn't really, their business isn't at that point that they're going to hire me, and that's fine. And then you should acknowledge that and be like, okay, when I'm looking for clients, this business was too small and I need to look at bigger ones for my next interviews. Cool. Thank you both very much for doing that. And yeah, questions?
I have a question. How do you, I guess the piece that I'm struggling with is how to identify, even if you don't, I understand, like, even if we don't know who our target customer is, and like that's one of the reasons why we're doing these customer interviews, how do we know who to even like reach out to ask these questions without giving too much context of why we're asking them, if that makes sense? Because let's say, in my case, like with the questions that Rosalinda was giving me, I don't know exactly what the purpose of the questions were. So I guess, how do you provide context without pitching your business, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so the way I do it, and it depends a little bit on your idea and what you're selling. The way I usually do it is with flattery. So I usually say something like, I'm starting a business in your space, that if it's something where I think that people might be concerned about competitive, I'd say that doesn't compete with you, but, or that a business that serves, that you might be a customer of, I might put it that way. And then say, you're like, I really respect the business you run and would love to get your valuable insight into how you run your business, or something like that. Do you have 5 to 10 minutes to jump on the phone and talk to me? I'd greatly appreciate it, or something like that. So it's a little bit of, and then sometimes even it's like, you know, you're particularly good at this and you're the only person I've found who does, or you're the best at this thing, and I would really like to learn about it from you. So it's like a little bit of flattery, a little bit of, you're the only one who can help me with this. And it's also, you know, I haven't given anything away other than I'm in that space, right? So they don't know what problem I'm going after. They don't know, you know, what I'm really doing. It's just, hey, I want to learn from you. This is early. And then sometimes if it's, you know, if you're later on and you have an established business, it could be like, hey, I run this. I see that you're someone that we could potentially help. This isn't a sales call. I just want to better understand how you do whatever it is that you do, right? And putting that "this is not a sales call" thing in your email will like increase your response rate by like 100%.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. So let's wrap up the last couple points and we can do whatever questions y'all have. All right. So the next thing is questions to never ever skip when you're on the call. So these are ones that you should always end with, which is, you don't have to do all three, but you'll get the gist of what we're asking here. Was there anything else you thought to say or that we should have spent more time on that you want to bring up now? So that gives them a chance to, if there's been something that, you know, they've been itching to tell you and you didn't ask about it, you're giving them an opportunity to say. Another way of asking that, or if you want to ask it in a different way, is what haven't I asked about my industry, my idea, this problem, whatever, that I should have asked or that you wish I had asked you, or what else should I know about whatever that thing is. That one has saved my butt countless times developing products where I didn't know that there was something that I should ask about. So in banking, that might have been a regulation or an industry group that has influence over the product I was building or something. And someone's like, hey, do you know about the Farm Share Association of America that buys all these farm loans? You should really talk to them. And I wouldn't have known to ask about that because I'm not an agricultural lender. But I asked that question and they told me, even though I seemed really dumb because I didn't know about it, but got me there. And then finally, who else should I talk to? Or even a better way maybe to say that is, could you give me 3 or 4 people or introduce me to 3 or 4 people in your industry that you know who I might be able to talk to about this? That's how, when you don't have a network and you're cold calling, that's how you like hit the easy button on getting more customers to talk to. All right, we did the mock interview. All right, so how do you know when you have your answer to your big question? It's pretty simple. When you stop hearing new things from the people you're talking to. It should take 5 to 10 conversations if those people you're talking to are all in the same customer segment, and your question is not too vague. You should have a, they don't care about this, or here's roughly the price range we're looking at, or these are the marketing channels that they might pay attention to. 5 to 10 conversations should get you there. If you're at 15 and you don't have a good answer yet, there's a few reasons that could happen. One is that you're talking to 2 different market segments and you're getting 2 different or 3 different answers because there's something different about those people who are giving different answers. So that's one thing that can happen, is if you're not focused enough in who you're trying to target. The second one is your big question could be too vague. and not have like a one definable answer, in which case you might want to take what you learned and refine your question and talk to some more people. Or it could be that you don't have much of a signal there and people don't really care about what you're talking about. And that leads us into the last one, which is it can be really hard to be honest with yourself. If the answer to your question is what you don't want to hear, you might keep trying to do customer interviews until someone gives you the right answer. But it's really important to honestly assess what you're hearing, and so that you don't waste time and build something or go after a business or brand it in a certain way that is not going to resonate with the market. And so once you get the answer to your big questions, what do? You pick 2 or 3 more big questions and you start over again until you feel comfortable where you are going to execute on what you've learned on. So, and then you might come back and do customer questions again later when you have more questions. And I threw some resources at the end. I'm specifically going to call out the first one, the MOM test. That's a great book on everything that we talked about so far. Hopefully Christina's mentioned it already to the FYSO group and recommended it. If not, Christina, I'm disappointed in you. And yeah, so go read that. And then the other ones are good too, but definitely read the MOM test.
Yes. Brendan, I love that you gave like specific recommendations on how many people you should interview to answer one question. I've been kind of digging around with other programs to see like how many interviews or other accelerator programs recommending people do. And I like that your recommendations to tie it to a question. And so like as you go deeper, you know, you tie 10, ideally 10 people have the answer that you need. But I know with NC Idea, they had 50 calls. One of my friends had 50 calls, customer interviews in 1 week, and then 20 in-depth interviews in another week, and then 20 interviews in week 4. Those are my notes.
Yeah, that seems
that's a lot.
Excessive to me. I mean, yeah, you should probably, before you seriously invest in something, talk to 50 different potential customers.
Sure.
But trying to do that in a week when you're learning is like,
right,
you're wasting time at that point. So
you have 6 months, and then you really have longer than that.
Yeah, and it's definitely try to go after the same thing until you're not learning anything new is the gist of it.
Honestly, I'm relieved to hear 50 is a lot. I was like, how many times can I do this?
I mean, my other answer to that question is that you should always be doing customer interviews no matter how far along you are in your business, which is why focusing it around like questions you want answered is helpful, because you're not doing the same thing over and over and over. You're like, I have a problem to solve or something that I don't know. I want to go know it. I'm going to know it. And then I'm going to figure out what's the next thing I need to know or to solve.
Yeah, I guess it's just like at the beginning when we're also trying to build something, having to do all of this at the same time is what I meant.
Yeah, for sure. But it should shape what you're building too. And the last thing I'll say, since Chloe's doing the CBD business, this method is particularly useful when you have a lot of unknowns in product and marketing risk. It's not useful for things that are like commodities. And when I say that, I mean things like if you are trying to sell a video game, like you can't really do customer interviews to figure out like if your video game is going to be successful. Like it doesn't work that way. Same thing with like mass consumer branding or things like social networks and things. Like Mark Zuckerberg didn't do customer interviews before he started Facebook, and they wouldn't have been effective if he did. If he went and asked like, how comfortable would you be sharing all of your private information with a large corporation? Like, not useful.
Yeah. It's a balance between prototype.
Yeah,
interview.
exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, even now I was like, oh man, I'm like, I have some new products I'm, messing around with in my head. And I'm like, oh man, I need to get back to it, because it's better to learn from customers, and a survey is not going to probably get it done. And no money, no validation.
Yeah.
If someone gives you money or signs up or says they're going to buy, no validation. Well, Brendan, thank